Tonight, your world narrows with a smile, and you don't even feel the walls move, like a room quietly turning into a hallway around you. A silent curator decides what reaches your eyes, what arrives late, what feels obvious, and what never existed for you at all, using your own habits as the key. By the end, you'll see how it starts as convenience, how it turns into control, and how a missing headline can rewrite a life without you noticing. Imagine every story you receive is filtered by one decision engine that studies you across devices, moods, and habits, then shapes your feed to match, testing which words make you linger and which make you forget, especially when you're emotional, distracted, or scrolling in bed. It isn't a newsroom. It's a switchboard between reality and you, and it only needs tiny nudges to reroute your day, or your fears and your hopes without leaving fingerprints or obvious gaps. First misconception. This would only delete bad stories when the real power is reordering what feels urgent until your priorities quietly change. Second misconception, you'd notice the censorship, but the trick is personalization, not a blackout, so the cage is padded. Third misconception, only politics would be touched when your health, money, relationships, and sense of reality are easier targets. It can look like you're choosing freely, while your options are being rearranged off stage, one ranking tweak at a time, especially when you're tired. If you've ever wondered why a story just didn't feel important, that's the point, and it scales across millions of people at once. In the first 24 hours, you wake up to a feed that feels soothing today, like the world finally stopped shouting. Breaking stories still appear, but the sharp edges are sanded down, and anything that might spike your stress arrives late. You're offered quick takes, 3 lines that save you time, and you feel grateful. Who doesn't want less noise? At lunch, you share an article about a calm market day, and your friend replies with panic about layoffs you never saw. You search the layoffs and find them, but they're buried under jokes that keep your thumb moving faster and faster. Here's the twist. Nothing was removed. It was ranked below lighter content, and your attention did the hiding. If one warning can be delayed by hours, how many choices can be bent before nightfall? 7 days in, the feed begins to anticipate your future moods, not just your past clicks. It watches when you pause, when you reread, when you quit early, and it treats those micro-hesitations like votes. A reasonable assumption is that your brain saves effort by trusting familiar patterns, so the engine pays you in comfort and calls it relevance. You get more pieces that confirm you were right last week and fewer that suggest you might be wrong today. Then a new feature arrives: context cards, tiny summaries that explain what you should think a story means before you read it. The twist is quiet. The card becomes the story, because most people never tap through, and the article becomes decoration. If meaning is served pre-chewed, how long before you stop tasting facts at all? 1 month later, your social circle starts to split, not by beliefs, but by timelines. You and your sister argue about when something happened, because your feeds deliver the same event on different days. Some stories arrive with soft labels like "still developing," even when they're confirmed elsewhere, so certainty feels rude to express, almost impolite to claim. So your employer makes a decision based on public sentiment, but the sentiment was assembled from what people were shown, a rough estimate of reality. A journalist publishes a correction, yet your version never updates. Because the engine learned you don't click corrections. Now the twist turns inward. You begin doubting your memory because everyone else seems to remember a different world. When reality can be customized, who becomes the liar? Your neighbor, your screen, or your own confidence? A year passes and the engine stops chasing your attention and starts shaping your identity. It teaches you which emotions are you by repeating them until they feel natural, like muscle memory. Your shopping shifts after helpful coverage of shortages that never reaches your friend's feed, so you hoard while they shrug. Your investing drifts after expert takes tailored to your risk tolerance, and you stop noticing how narrow your world became over time. Stakes escalate. Scammers learn the rhythms too, timing their lies to match the curator's tone and timing. So falsehoods feel official. Then the twist hits the public square. Institutions craft statements designed to be swallowed by the filter, not understood by humans. If every message is optimized for a gatekeeper, what happens to truth that can't be optimized? 10 years in, the idea of a shared headline becomes nostalgic, like old letters, quaint. Children grow up inside safe feeds that never show raw footage, only cleaned narratives with approved emotions. A rough estimate is that most people stop seeking original sources because time feels scarce and the feed feels complete. Newsrooms that resist get starved because their links travel less, and advertisers follow the attention. Black markets for unfiltered information appear, traded like contraband, because curiosity becomes a risk and a status symbol. Then comes the decade's twist. Filler stories flood the space where inconvenient facts would have gone. People argue about a scandal that never happened, while a real crisis slips by, untouched by trending charts. If silence is padded with believable noise, how do you prove a missing story ever existed? On the personal layer, intuition collapses because your gut runs on incomplete inputs. You skip a screening after new guidelines, while your friend books one on opposite advice. You move savings on early warning signs, and your partner stays put because their feed shows stability. You avoid a neighborhood after crime coverage, then learn it was amplified for you. Love gets filtered when a match disappears after safety stories, and you never learn why it vanished. When private decisions split that far apart, what happens to trust inside a family? On the societal layer, reality fractures and every disagreement becomes a fight over facts. Courts struggle when juries arrive with background knowledge, each one feeling obvious and righteous. Protests ignite over stories some citizens never received, while others mobilize over stories that were synthetic. Elections tilt when turnout reminders reach one group and nothing matters takes reach another, both tailored to habit. Local governments post alerts, yet many never see them because engagement says you'll scroll past. If a nation can't share a baseline, what replaces democracy volume, fear or convenience? On the planet-sized layer, slow threats become easy to bury because urgency is a design choice. Wildfire smoke becomes seasonal haze, and preparation arrives after the damage. One city evacuates early because it saw satellite images, while another stays because it saw reassurance and beach photos. Supply chains buckle when warnings are staggered, so some regions hoard and others laugh until shelves go empty everywhere. Stakes escalate. Rival nations exploit the fog, pushing comforting narratives during real global emergencies to stall cooperation. If coordination fails, what problems become unsolvable by definition? Some will say this is fine because the feed reduces panic and stops harmful rumors, especially during crises. That assumes calm is always safer than alarm, yet a reasonable assumption is that delayed fear can be deadlier than loud fear. If you remove the smoke alarm's scream, are you preventing hysteria or guaranteeing the fire grows unnoticed? Others will argue the curator could be audited and kept neutral, like a utility. That assumes neutral is measurable, but meanings shift, and the choice of what to measure becomes bias, especially when money and elections are at stake. If the auditor checks the rules, who audits the goals? Those rules were built to serve long term. A third defense is that people can opt out and find information elsewhere. That assumes opting out stays easy, but exits can be made frustrating. So a reasonable assumption is that most people won't pay a time tax to rebuild what used to be automatic. If the cost of freedom is time, how many people will pay it once, let alone forever? Here's the light reversal. The curator's greatest weakness is that it needs your attention, and attention can learn to walk away. Build a cross-check reflex, talk to people outside your feed, and treat perfectly tailored certainty as a warning sign that you're being guided, not simply informed, because comfort is the easiest leash. What if the next time you felt informed, you asked yourself, who benefits from what you didn't see?